You're sure you have the right insurance, right? I mean, does it matter what kind of insurance you get? All insurance is the same for your rental property, right? Wrong. Today, I want to talk to you about getting the right kind of insurance and what you should be looking for if you are renting out a short term rental. Now, one of the things I want to do is share with you a true story. Now, I happen to own some short term rentals in the Broken Bow, Oklahoma area for the last several years. And a year and a half ago or so, there was a guy that I met out there. He was a good investor. And I was talking to him a little bit about some of his investments. I mean, he had short-term rentals all over the country, several locations. He had some in the Smokies. He had some in Florida, down on the beach. And so I was talking to him a little bit about his property in Broken Bow. And he shared a story with me that was pretty amazing. One of the things he said that he had a guest come and stay at his property. And this property was amazing. I'd seen it before, beautiful, slept, 20 plus people in the property. And while he was there, what happened was he had a guest come and stay. They checked into the property. They're having a great time. And I mean, you talk about the amenities at this place, pickleball court, hot tub, pool. I mean, you name it. It had everything you can imagine in the place, very luxury. And it had a big sitting area in the back, covered patio area. Everybody's hanging out, having a good time. Well, at some point later in the afternoon, they started cooking on the grill, but the grill was underneath the covered patio area. And as they were cooking, they weren't really paying attention to the hot dogs, the bratwurst, and all the other stuff that they were cooking on there because they were out playing on the pickleball court and watching the kids. And so what started off as a little spark that got a little out of control, that turned into an actual fire on the grill, it then began to spread on its way all the way up into the actually covered patio area. And literally, what started off as a small grease fire turned into a literal cabin fire. And these people, instead of calling 911, instead of doing something about it and handling it the right way, what did they do? They got in their car, they packed up their stuff while the place was on fire, and they drove away. They literally left the premises. And of course, what started off as a small little grease fire turned into a cabin fire that resulted in the entire investment being on fire. So this was a disaster for them. And so before I go into telling you the rest of the story on this, let me tell you a little bit about some of the things you need to know. You need at least 4 things when you start talking about the essentials of having your short-term rental insurance policy put in place. Number 1, you need to make sure that you have commercial coverage. And what I mean by that is I think the statistics on this are crazy. It's like 65 or more % of short-term rental investors either have the wrong type of insurance or they are underinsured woefully for their property. And they don't ever know it until they need to file a claim. And then they realize they're going to come out of pocket for all the damage that was done to the property. So let's talk about that for a second. You need to make sure that you are obtaining a commercial property insurance package from the broker you're talking to at the time you sign off on your policy. And most people don't spend the time doing this. They're too busy, excited about closing. And it comes time for renewal. What do people care about? Let's just get the cheapest policy that we can. But the reality of it is many insurance brokers will push people towards, especially if you don't have an LLC, if you don't have your property in an LLC and it's not being treated as a legitimate business, many of these insurance people, these agents are going to push you towards a standard second home insurance policy, and it's going to be deficient. And if you don't believe me, go to page 60 to 80 range of your policy. When you look there, you're going to see a section that says exclusions. And when you really dig deep into that exclusion section, you're going to be looking for business exclusions, commercial use exclusions. And I want you to understand that has been ruled in pretty much every state that if you're renting out your property for any commercial reason, I mean, if you're making money on it, it's a commercial business use. So what you're doing is paying for an insurance policy you're getting zero coverage on, and that's just not going to work. You have to make sure you do not have commercial or business use exclusions in the policy that you signed up for. So number 2, premises liability coverage. And I talk about that within the context of this story because I'm going to show you we'll get into more depth about that here in a minute. But premises liability coverage, what does that mean? You are protecting yourself from a negligence lawsuit because someone is hurt on your property and they're going to claim it was due to your negligence. Every property owner has a duty of care to provide a safe environment for every guest. The problem is, even if you exercised your duty of care and you did what you were supposed to do, If someone gets hurt on your property, they're going to claim you didn't. And they're going to want to sue you every single time because these lawyers are going to see you as a deep pocket. Okay. They're going to look at you and say, the owner, they've got to have some money. So I'm going to go after them. So this is really important that you do this. Slip and fall claims, serious injuries, swimming pool, people using amenities, pickleball courts, you name it. Everything that's involved in that, this is exactly what you're protecting for. You need to have a minimum of $1 million up to $2 million in premises liability coverage here. This is to protect if someone falls and hurts themselves. It doesn't matter if your property's worth 150 grand or less. I'm not talking about the value of your property. I'm talking about protecting yourself. If someone gets hurt, you want to be able to make sure that you're going to be squared away and you're going to have at least $1 million to $2 million in premises liability coverage. Okay. Now, the next thing, number 3, we want to talk about what we call an all risk dwelling coverage policy. What does this mean? This is protecting you in case the cabin fire example. This is a great example of this. This covers you from exactly the situation that my friend experienced, the guy that I knew, this investor, because the problem for him was he was denied any help from Airbnb. And this is really important because some people say, well, I don't really need insurance there. I'm sure Airbnb will help me. No. Airbnb and VRBO might help you with small incidental things if a guest damages your property. But Airbnb laughed at him when they asked if Airbnb would cover the damage to his property because it burned to the ground. They absolutely provided him no help whatsoever. So now he was underinsured for the rebuild because here's what ended up happening. He had nearly a $200,000 gap between what he was insured for and what the actual cost of the rebuild would be. Remember, we're going through a period of inflation right now. So even though he had purchased his cabin several years previously, he had kept his policy on his rebuild costs about what the value is for the build at a lower price than what it was going to take to actually rebuild because of inflation. Talk about supply chain issues and all these other concerns. Now he had this gap. Guess who had to cover the gap? He did. He had to come out of pocket for that amount of difference. But on top of that, he still had to pay all of his regular expenses, his mortgage, all the other things that he had going on there. And so it nearly bankrupted him under those circumstances. So it's really important to understand that difference that had to come out of his own pocket. Okay. Finally, number 4, loss of income. And this is a big one. So what does this mean? Well, you really have a true commercial insurance policy if you can take a look at it and see that in the event, let's say someone catches your kitchen on fire or something bad happens where now you have to actually pull the asset off platform and you can't put it out there on Airbnb and VRBO. You want to be able to make sure now that you can cover your carry costs. It'll pay your mortgage, reasonable profits that would have come in terms of what you put on Airbnb or VRBO. If you don't have this can really put you in a crunch. Imagine having a property for 15 months. That's how long it took to rebuild for this guy I knew, the investor. During that period of time, he has to pay his mortgage. He has to cover all of his carry costs, all of his expenses, everything that's there. That didn't absolve him of that. He had to still cover all of that. That literally set him back over the next several years of not really being able to invest in much of anything else because he had to sink every extra dollar he had into just propping everything up and not having to go bankrupt. So you want to make sure you cover each and every one of these to mitigate your losses in the event of the worst case scenario. So the moral of the story in this situation, first, my friend learned that he must read the fine print on any insurance policy. Never just trust the agent who sells you the policy. Never assume that what they're telling you is exactly correct. You've got to read the fine print on these policies and do not trust the agent alone. Secondly, he also learned that you've got to also make sure that you check this insurance policy, not just to see that it's a commercial coverage, which is critical for a short-term rental, but that he also had checked the box for premises liability, all risk dwelling coverage policy, loss of income. All of these things were very critical. I always tell people, you don't need insurance until you do. You don't need asset protection until you do. These things are critical to mitigate your risk as an investor. That begs the question, is insurance enough by itself? Do you even really need asset protection? First, do you really want to trust your investments to a third-party agent who has every reason in the world to deny your claim? Secondly, never forget if you're sued by an attorney, these shark lawyers will come after you and your insurance company for everything they can to get every dollar they can for their client. If you want to make sure you have the right asset protection structure that makes you anonymous to everyone and makes you very unattractive to attorneys, check out this video. I'll see you over there.